On the day of my exam on the 8th, I believe I was aware that there could have been a fire in the upstairs fireplace from the information that was passed to me by the Sheriff's Department detectives.
If I can stop you right there, when we say upstairs, we're talking about the main floor of the house, is that correct? Okay.
There's basement in the main floor, and if I misspeak, I say main floor, first floor, I'm meaning the main floor where the living room is.
Very good.
So I started examining the fireplaces. Let's look at photo 19.
Is that photo 19 on the screen?
This is photo 19. This is the main floor fireplace. Before I talk about this, I just want to go to photo 20 real quick. Yes, that's photo 20. I documented what was inside the fireplace, and there is burnt wood in the fireplace. So that tells me there may have been a fire. Now, obviously, is it possible that fire debris during the collapse got in there? It's possible, but unlikely, because the collapse is going to come straight down versus jump sideways. This is likely it's probable that there was a fire in that main floor fireplace. Now we can go back to 19. So I'm examining the fireplace. To understand the construction of this fireplace, this is a modern fireplace versus I'll call an old-time hand-built fireplace. Old-time hand-built fireplace, the kind you'll find in the nice farmhouses that are 150 years old. They were built piece by piece with stone or brick, made the firebox where the fire actually was built. There was a brick or clay liner in the chimney that went up to carry the smoke out. Typical modern fireplaces are a contained steel box, and that's what you're looking at there. And out of the top of the steel box is a steel round chimney pipe. Sometimes it's referred to as a vent or a flue, and that is the round chimney pipe that's connected to that firebox, the steel firebox, and then it runs up, eventually out through the roof. Then what's the important part for that is the actual fireplace construction. Typically then, people build walls around it because nobody wants to look at the ugly backside of a metal fireplace or the chimney. So they'll build walls around it, and sometimes you'll see they'll actually put like brick or stone on these walls, but that's just for decoration. The walls themselves are typically built of wood. And I refer to that as the chimney chase. So that's the area inside or around the chimney, the metal chimney, that's separating that chimney from the rest of the living portion of the house, is this chase. And it's typically built with wood. It may be drywalled. Sometimes they'll have OSB on there. It varies on construction, but that's a chimney chase. So I'm considering ignition sources from the fireplace. Did the chimney malfunction? Was there a chimney fire? If the chimney malfunctions, I've seen it where holes have developed in chimney pipe. So now the hot gases from the smoke that go up the chimney can escape the chimney itself and get into this chase area. Now this chase area is built with, especially in this case, you can see it's built with wooden structural members. So that those wooden structural members have some sort of sheeting on the outside. Could be OSB, could be drywall. That's going to contain, just like we talked about earlier with the laundry machines. If that hot smoke or gases that in that chase, that's going to contain that hot gases and eventual fire for a while inside that chase. The fire inside that chase is going to go up, typically burn out the roof at the top of the chase, and then it's going to eventually spread outward. And as it spreads outward, it's going to consume the fuel or the wooden structural material that make up that chase to proceed. And typically that'll always happen at the top versus the bottom, depending on where the hot gases from the chimney collect the most and longest for the fire to start. Excuse me. You can see here on the photo 19, this is the upstairs fireplace again, and you can see the remnants of the wall that was built around it. This wall would have been part of the chimney chase, where the metal chimney would have gone behind it. You can see there's 3 2x4 studs still in place and intact to the right. There's one directly above that is broken up to the left. That's broken off, but in your mind's eye, you can straighten it up and you can see where would be. And there's one that's missing directly above it, of the fireplace. There's an area where there should have been one. If you know what you're looking for, right at the bottom, you can see the stub where the nails were, right there. Yeah, there was one. Now, that's obviously, remember, we've had a lot of fire in here and structural collapse. And we've also have that 2x6 that runs horizontally right across the top of the fireplace. That still has clean wood and burns. So like I mentioned before, that likely had drywall on it up until the fire hoses hit it and knocked it off. So looking at the damage profile, specifically the lack of damage there, that's significant in considering this as a chimney fire or a fireplace fire. Additionally, if we look at photo 21, this is the chimney pipe that I collected from inside the structure. Yesterday we talked about excavating. Later I would excavate then it would be the basement floor, but had the debris from both the basement, main floor, and the roof directly above in this area. This chimney pipe was located. I moved it out and I put it here. I examined it and nothing extraordinary came to my attention. Obviously, if you look at it, it's bent, it's burned, but remember there was a whole house burning on top of it at one point. So, and the collapse happened, that's going to disform the metal, disform the pipe, and it was under burning roof sections for a while. So there is fire damage. But that being, what I discovered is there was nothing obvious to me that would indicate there was something wrong with that chimney. And that also states for the fireplace itself, I didn't find anything obvious with the metal fireplace box that would show that it malfunctioned or there was something wrong with it. And that backs up with the lack of burning of the wooden stud members around it. At that point, I could eliminate the fireplace and chimney as a potential ignition source.
If I can back up then to number 19, I guess, and maybe I missed this, but can you explain why it is you would expect this stud right here to be burned?
If the fireplace was the start of the fire is going to be directly above the fire. I'm sorry, I'm doing that again. Is going to be directly above the fireplace, and that's going to be one of the first structural members that are going to burn.
And so I guess just by the dynamic, would we expect then, as it burns to the roof, hot material to be falling down on top of the fireplace? Or what are we?
It depends if we're talking about the fires in the chase or outside the chase.
Inside the chase.
If it's inside the chase, the fire's going to go up inside the chase. If it burns the roof section, that'll eventually burn and fall down into and sit on top of the fireplace itself. I've seen fires in new houses before where the cellulose insulation will fall in, and on top of that firebox, and start the fire on top of that box, of the firebox. But the fire is inside the chase, sitting on top of that metal firebox, not in the place where the fire is supposed to be, which is surrounded by like fire bricks. So yes, if the fire was down there, we'd expect to burn off that area.
And what other hypothesis did you consider as to the cause of the fire?
I considered the possibility of a log rolling out of the fireplace. The entire living room was consumed. The floor, the furniture, the whole thing was consumed. So by looking at that hypothesis, that was more of a mental examination of the fire dynamics. So we think about, okay, what would happen if a log on fire rolled out into the room? If that burning log is sitting in the middle of the room, the fire from that log is still going to go up. It's going to start burning the floor underneath it. But for the fire to spread from that log, it's going to take a significant amount of time. And when I mean significant, I mean it's going to take several minutes for it to really spread, versus if a log rolls onto your floor in your living room, the whole living room floor isn't going to burst into flames. It's going to take a while for it to progress. Same thing if that log, let's say, rolled all the way over and was up against the couch. The couch is going to catch fire, yes, but if you would watch it, it would start at the log, it would start slowly moving up and into the couch and start slowly spreading on the couch. And of course, as it's doing this, it's giving off smoke and heat that would be easily detectable by someone in the house before it could spread to the entire living room area. So with that dynamic eliminates the log hypothesis as a fire cause.
And if I can kind of circle back to the idea of a chimney or a fireplace fire, you indicated that those are kind of it takes time for the heat to build up before that fire can erupt, for lack of better words.
Because yes, the main heat is contained in the firebox and in the chimney. How that heat gets out usually comes from a small, like a chimney, even a chimney fire. It's a chimney fire that escapes the chimney. It's coming through a small hole. So that's all the heat has to come through that small hole until at some point it ignites the surrounding chimney chase. That can take time. Obviously, times are very subjective depending on how close the combustible materials are to the chimney, how long has it been, and how old is it, the materials that are made of. So that's very subjective. But yes, it doesn't. If you have a hole in your chimney, you start a fire, it's not going to the whole thing isn't going to burst into flames. There's going to be a progression.
And in that progression, would there be smoke?
There would be.
And is that something that possibly a person who's not invalid would possibly notice within the residence?
He's not any kind of human factors expert. What somebody would or would not do is not within his expertise.
I think he's capable of testifying based on his training experience about he's investigated these in the past. I think it's fairly reasonable.
I'll allow it.
A typical person should notice smoke in their house. Where that, again, every fire is a little different, so I can't say if this would have been a chimney fire exactly how the smoke and heat would have progressed.
Fair, thank you. And so we've talked about a log rolling out, and you have eliminated that. What is your next hypothesis that you went to?
One of the hypotheses I considered was during the interviews, the initial interviews with Linda Stermer, she mentioned that there was some an oil candle on the, I believe it was the half wall between the living room and the dining room on the north side. Again, I considered that. Again, that is a small fire source. I don't know what this oil candle looked like. I'm using generalization terms. I'm assuming it is a normal, could be as much as a lantern, an oil lantern, or a smaller candle that's from.
He's simply speculating. Harry just said he doesn't know what it looked like.
Well, then, yeah, he's describing what are possible oil lanterns that he's encountered, so I think he's even said he doesn't know what it was, but he's just describing what they could be.
Oh, no,
That's still,
I was given information that there was an oil candle in the area. I do not know the size or makeup of it. But if this candle broke or tipped over, again, the fire is going to be relatively small. And it's going to be contained over towards the area of where it was located, which is the half wall towards the north side of the living room. That did not, again, that also has a hard time meeting the challenge of going undiscovered until it was a very large fire.
And these oil lamps, are you familiar with what type of fuel they burn?
The typical oil that these lamps burn are lamp oil. It would actually, if it's tested in a lab, it would come back referred to as a heavy petroleum distillate, which is the same as kerosene or diesel fuel.
And in this case, did you ever receive any lab reports that there was a heavy, which you just described here in court, present in the Stermer residence?
In the lab results back, there were no indications of a heavy petroleum distillate.
Thank you. And what was the next hypothesis you would have considered?
The next hypothesis I considered was an intentionally started fire. With this hypothesis, the one piece of data on this date, I had smelled accelerant on Todd Stermer's pants. I later learned to further that hypothesis, I waited until I got lab results. I got the lab results back that Todd Stermer's pants had gasoline on them. So I took that information and said, does that fit what I have at the scene? So with a gasoline is on Todd Stermer, and Todd Stermer is also severely burned. So remember I talked about burns on people are also burn patterns. Just like looking at the structure, the burns on Todd Stermer indicated he was at or near the.
move the strike. One, he's not a medical expert, and under Smelser versus Norfolk Railway, he can't testify to medical conditions.
He's not
He's
testifying
not
about a medical
qualified to that.
condition. He's talking about the burns he
He's
observed on
talking
his
about
body.
causation.
You're both talking at the
Sorry,
same
Your
time.
Thank you. He's talking about causation, burn patterns causing whatever this degree of injury is. That's a medical opinion he can't make.
I don't think that's what he was testifying to. I think
You're just
Mr.
asking about burn patterns?
Yeah,
I'll allow the testimony was to burn patterns, and obviously cross-examination would be allowed on that.
thank you.
As a burns on a person is a burn pattern. It is stated right in NFPA 921 that burns on a human is a burn pattern.
You just mentioned NFPA 921. We haven't heard that here in court yet today. What is that?
Okay.
What is that, please?
NFPA 921, it's a long acronym. The NFPA stands for National Fire Protection Association. The National Fire Protection Association puts out volumes and volumes of information about building construction, safety precautions, anything to do with fire. And there's so many of them, they give them a number. So the specific number, NFPA, National Fire Protection Association 921, is the document that the National Fire Protection Association puts out as a guide to fire investigations. And that is updated, well, now it's updated about every 3 years.
Guide, or has it also been considered a reference manual?
It's a guide, it's a reference manual.
Very good. So again, we just talked about you considered the burns on Todd Stermer. How is that relevant to your determination of an intentionally set fire?
We know that Todd, with the burns on Todd, I know he is at or near the area of origin. And with the gasoline, positive for gasoline on his sweatpants, that says there is gasoline at the area, at or near the area of origin. Now, the gasoline at the area of origin actually fits the description of a fast-moving fire, where a whole, instead of a small individual area, the whole area is on fire at the same time.
Well, let's go this way. Does the statement of Linda Stermer that you reviewed factor into this as well?
Linda Stermer's statement is very important to my factor.
Why is that?
Because Linda Stermer was at the scene. She was in the house. She was able to give statements. Witness statements are very important. Her statement was that she was in the basement. She heard Todd upstairs scream. She ran upstairs and she saw the living room on fire. Subsequent statements, that was the initial statement I believe she gave the detective route. Then later statements were more specific. It says, started the same, in the basement, heard Todd scream, ran up the stairs, described seeing the recliner towards the north side of the living room on fire. Todd was towards the south in the living room with his upper torso on fire. And there was fire on the floor between Todd and the recliner. That description of a very quick starting fire, of she's in the basement, she's awake, and she hears a scream, that would be in. Then she goes upstairs and finds this large fire, not concentrated in one area, but it's spread in two areas across the room with a connecting fire between. That is an indication of a fast fire, which would be explained by the presence of an ignitable liquid, gasoline, which would lead to, and there's been no evidence of why gasoline should be in the living room. That would to lead me to believe this is an intentionally set fire.
Now, additionally, for lack of a word, trail of fire from essentially one side of the living room to the other was described by Linda Stermer. Is that what your testimony was?
Yes.
And in your line of work, is that described as something?
It can mean several things.
Okay.
I'd prefer just to leave it at that statement.
Okay, fair enough. So your conclusion, based on your review of the evidence, and I'm summarizing the gasoline and what was described by Linda Stermer, is this was an intentionally set fire. Is that correct?
Correct. And this also, I also use this to confirm my origin determination. She says the origin is in the main floor, first floor living room.
And so we've already kind of talked about what the first fuel ignited is earlier. Do you have an opinion as to what the first fuel ignited in this case was?
Yes, I do.
What was that?
The first fuel ignited was fumes from the gasoline.
And let's talk about that a little bit. How does gasoline burn, for lack of a better way to describe it?
Gasoline, as we know, is liquid. We put it in our lawnmowers and our cars. People who are unsafe sometimes try to use it to get their leaves burning. When you burn gasoline, it's actually not the liquid that burns, it's the vapor that comes off the gasoline that burns. So if you've ever seen videos of people pour gasoline on a pile of leaves and then they start walking up to it with something to light it, and it catches on fire before they get to the pile of leaves, that's because the vapors from the gasoline, the liquid gasoline, has now evaporated and spread into a vapor cloud until it hits an ignition source, and then it ignites.
And does the fact that the gasoline may be indoors or outdoors affect how that may happen?
The environment as a whole, indoors or outdoors, is going to affect, is there a wind, the temperature, if it's hotter outside, the gasoline is going to evaporate quicker. Any air currents are going to move the vapor around.
And in this case, I've already asked you what the ignition source. Did you determine what you believe to be the ignition source in this case?
The ignition source would have been open flame.
Do you have any idea what the source of the open flame may have been?
I do not know definitively what the open flame would be.
But we do know there was a fire burning in the fireplace per the statements of Linda Stermer.
There was open flame in the living room from statements and indications that there's logs, so there would have been open flame in the fireplace.
Now, we've talked about what you kind of touched on it already, but what is a flash fire?
A flash fire is almost self-descriptive. It's a fire that immediately propagates quickly, like a flash. It goes very fast. It would be indicative of a gasoline fire.
So, for instance, when the vapors of a gasoline poured someplace are exposed to an open flame.
Correct. It's the vapors are going to ignite. The fire and the vapors are going to spread to the source, which is typically going to be the liquid gasoline, because that's where the source of the gasoline vapors came from. And then the fire is then going to make the liquid gasoline evaporate faster because it's hotter, and then it'll be burned more, and it'll burn faster until the gasoline, in some cases, is burned up.
And that was my next question. Can fire totally consume gasoline,
Yes,
leaving no trace?
it is possible. Yes.
And just so the record's clear, and Judge, I'm going to ask this as a leading question so we don't go afoul of anything. You're not offering any opinion here today as to who set this fire, correct?
No.
You have just a moment, Your Honor? Just one last question. I am sorry. I neglected to ask this. You indicated earlier there was a fuel oil furnace in this house. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is fuel oil different from gasoline?
It is.
How so?
So they're both petroleum products, but they're refined differently. If you were to take fuel oil and submit it to the laboratory for analysis, that would come back as a heavy petroleum distillate. The lab, and if you ever had Troy Ernst, he probably described this better than I did, but it is different than gasoline. Gasoline can be determined specifically where the other petroleum distillates are put into broad categories of heavy, medium, and light petroleum distillates. Fuel oil would be a heavy petroleum distillate along with kerosene and some lamp oils.